I'll have these players here play something like the murder of my father before mine uncle. I'll observe his looks, I'll tend him to the quick. If he but blench, I know my course. This spirit I have seen may be the devil, for the devil hath the power to assume a pleasing shape, yea, and perhaps out of my weakness and my melancholy, as he is very potent with such spirits, abuses me to damn me. I'll have grounds more relative than this, the play. The play is the thing, wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. And he does, and the king runs out screaming, "Give me some light!" because darkness is closing around him.
Welcome to a conversation with Dr. Jim Bob Stephenson. I'm Sharon Newman. I'm the Grand Traverse County Senior Center Network Outreach Program Coordinator. And Dr. Stephenson has recently completed a 4-week seminar on Brush Up Your Shakespeare, where participants studied and learned about Shakespeare through a Midsummer Night's Dream. And we thought it would be nice to have a little more extensive conversation with Dr. Stephenson, a retired actor, director, professor. It's been just a wonderful experience, Dr. Stephenson, working with you, and I know all the students really enjoyed this program very much. And many of us had questions about your background. You just seem to be alive with a beautiful history of experiences. Can you tell me about your first interest in Shakespeare and theater?
No, that's two different things. Shakespeare and theater. I began acting when I was 5 years old. My first, earliest memory of performance, I was on the shores of Lake Michigan, and 5 soldiers from Camp Custer were there, and I said, "Would you like to hear me recite?" And they looked a little puzzled, and they agreed to hear me recite. So I recited some black dialect things that my mother had taught me. My mother was from Arkansas. And when I was through, each one of them gave me a dime. I was a professional at the age of 5.
That's some nice encouragement.
And I have been acting ever since. I began working with the University of Michigan Players when I was still in grade school. And my first leading role was when I was in kindergarten. I played Tom Tit-Tot, which was Rumpelstiltskin in another version. I played the lead in that. And from then on, I've been playing ever since. And my last role was just 2 or 3 years ago.
So you acted all through school?
No, wait, I said playing and Shakespeare. Okay. Shakespeare? Mm-hmm. I think I was in 10th grade at the University High School in Ann Arbor. And Valentine Wint, who was the director of the University Theater, was doing a production of Julius Caesar. And I played Lucius, who was Brutus's servant in that production. And I was hooked from then on. And ever since that time, whenever possible, I played in Shakespeare. I played the Duke of Clarence in a production of Richard III in 1962, I think it was. Mm-hmm. I played the Duke of Clarence, and I got stabbed with the dagger that we used in the seminar. And I think that may have been the last role that I played. I don't remember now. But I have played Petruchio in Taming of the Shrew, And I have directed Macbeth and Othello, The Tempest, The Taming of the Shrew, Midsummer Night's Dream, and The Merchant of Venice. Did I mention that? Well,
Not yet.
anyway,
Not yet.
I did it twice, so that's okay if I mention it. That's all right. I did it twice. And I've always enjoyed doing Shakespeare because it's a challenge, not only because the language is archaic and almost incomprehensible because it's 400 years old, but it is a wonderful challenge to be able to communicate by one's own understanding and therefore clear interpretation to an audience who has to go by their ears one time and understand what it is that's being said. It's very difficult. And it's one of the things that I've had trouble with young actors, knowing how to use word emphasis and pauses to clarify the meaning when rattling through it from the capital letter to the period may not do it at all. Now, if you're reading, you can stop and ponder and think about it and look up some words, but in the theater, they have to understand it the first time, or there's no point in saying it. So that's been my philosophy about all the Shakespeare that I've ever done for the public.
I know in our seminar, and as we commented today after seeing the film, it was very helpful to have the reading together.
Yes.
And is that the technique then you would use with, whether you were working with young children or more mature student actors? Mm-hmm.
Well, it's always well when the language is as, I will say, obscure as Shakespeare sometimes is, to have read it before, and so you know what the words mean. And I had a wonderful teacher at the University of Michigan, G.B. Harrison, who had been a lecturer at Oxford in England. And he never let us get away from a line without understanding perfectly what it meant. And I took my cue from him in this seminar. And I perhaps over-explained sometimes.
I don't think so.
Well, okay.
It was very nicely
But I would rather
done.
err on that side than have confusion.
Did your young family life, your parents, play a role in nurturing your interest in the creative arts?
No, my father had a beautiful tenor voice, but he was too embarrassed to sing. My mother was perfectly certain that I was never going to experience the stage fright that clammed her up every time she stood up and tried to talk to anybody. And so that's why I learned all kinds of pieces from the time I was a tiny, tiny little kid. And I would inflict them on anybody who would listen. And I never had, as a result, any kind of stage fright at all. And my children were the same way because they began acting. Well, Tony acted when she was 5 years old, and Evelyn acted when she was 3 years old. And so they grew up understanding what the responsibility that an actor has to an audience, learning the words and saying them so they can be understood. And so they've never had the problem of stage fright because they've always performed in my shows.
It's very frightening for most people to perform and speak in front of a group.
My mother encouraged me, not only by teaching me things to say, but she always encouraged me to get up and perform if anybody would allow me to do so, and I never was reluctant to do it.
Well, I know from our prior conversations that you've worked with some fairly well-known people, actually some famous people, and I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about working with them and what you learned. And
well, perhaps the only one that would be memorable now to anybody would be James Earl Jones. He was a student of mine at the University of Michigan. I was teaching a course in radio acting. Can you imagine having that wonderful voice of his in a beginning radio acting class? It was a gift from heaven, believe me. And he was a very dedicated performer. And I had the opportunity of directing him in many, many, many radio dramas. That's before television killed radio drama, of course. And then, as you know, he went on and made a very great success out of his life. Now I've worked with a lot of other people. That I worked with Basil Rathbone, I worked with Raymond Massey, and lots of others who, I'll tell you how that happened. Every spring, Valentine Wint, who was our director, had New York players come for 8 weeks, a different play every week. The leads would come and play their roles they had played on Broadway, and he would fill in the supporting roles with a nucleus company that he kept there on hand, and all the minor roles, Madam, your carriage waits without kind of people, spear carriers, were students at the university. And so I got to work and observe and study some of the most famous people of all that were famous in the theater at that time. This was in the 1930s and 40s.
At that time, were you already doing radio acting?
Oh yes, I was doing radio acting all along there at the university on WUOM. And then I was a professional radio actor at WWJ during the 1950s.
What kinds of shows did they have on radio?
Well, there were dramas, half-hour dramas. I have the distinction of being in the very last live half-hour radio drama out of Detroit.
Oh my goodness.
It was called the Mark Adams program, and I was a regular cast member on that radio program. And then what happened was, when television came over and supplanted radio drama, killed it, literally killed it, and it is no more. I was fortunate enough to be photogenic enough and enough dedication to the art to move into television. And I was on many, many, many live television shows. One particular show that I was on often was a live program called Traffic Court, real reality TV. And the judge was the judge who had actually tried these cases in real life.
So this was a true reality show back in the 50s?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And what happened was that we were given a summary of the trial. We memorized the details of the person's defense. You know, I played a drunk, for example, who had run into the back of a police car. And my daughter Robin was only 3 years old when they watched it on television live from WWJ in Detroit.
Oh
there in Ann Arbor, they were watching it. And she said, "Mommy, how are they going to get Daddy out of that box?"
So was the transition to television challenging for you?
Very, very challenging. And as I have said often, that kind of television was the worst possible experience in the world, because it combined the necessity for absolute timing. You had to get on the air and off the air at exactly the right time. Memorization, as on the stage. Close-ups, so you had to know where the cameras were so that you didn't jump out of the camera, didn't suddenly have a rise or a move off to the left or right. All of those things were live television that made it a very, very difficult challenging job to do, and many people couldn't do it. And of course, many people in radio were not photogenic. The man who played the lead role in the Mark Adams program had a yacht. He had a berth for his yacht at Grosse Pointe. He had a summer home in the Upper Peninsula. He was a very, very rich man until television killed him. Almost literally. He ended up as the assistant news director at some radio station off in Oskaloosa or Escanaba or someplace like that. He lost everything because he was gross looking. He was not at all an attractive human being, personally, and he could not make the change. So he lost his yacht, he lost his summer home, he lost everything.
With your talent and your ability to transfer into television, you also, seems to me that you had another desire. You wanted to further your education. But first you got married to the love of your life, Lucy.
Well, not almost. What happened was I had always planned to be an actor. And I got home from the Army after 3 years and 2 months away from my girl. And my father said, "Jim Bob, you have given more than 3 years to your country. I will send you to any acting or theater or drama school you want me to." And I said, "Dad, thank you very much, but I think I want to be a teacher." He said, "Thank God." So I got home on August the 11th, and I got married to my girl on August the 18th. I finished my senior year at the University of Michigan. In 1 year, I got my master's degree. I taught for 2 years at Highland Park Junior College and came back, and for the next 10 years, we had babies and a PhD.
Wow. That sounds impossible, but you did it.
I did it. It took me 10 years to get that idiot degree.
But you love teaching. It shows today. It shows
well,
today.
I do love teaching. There's no question about that. And I have always lived by the thing that my father taught me, and he said, "Don't you ever forget this. The greatest sin in teaching is lack of enthusiasm for your material."
Very wise advice.
Very wise, very wise.
That's true. I can think of a handful of teachers in my life who were enthusiastic about their subject, and those are the teachers I remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember the other ones very well, if at all.
That's
so true.
And so I decided that I was going to be the best teacher I could be. I wasn't in competition with anybody else. I was in competition with myself, as you are as an actor, ultimately.
Did you find in teaching, because you were teaching acting and theater among other subjects probably?
Well, I taught acting and directing and play production, theater history. I actually taught scene design at one point. And all of children's theater. My wife and I wrote 18 children's plays and produced them with a group called, we called the Play Package Company. We traveled with a group of university kids from Kent State to elementary schools all over northeastern Ohio. And we would get in about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, just in time for the school to let out. We would set up our show, put on a play for them, pack up and go back to Kent State. And it did one very interesting thing. After being in that kind of children's theater, you never are afraid again on the stage, because you never know what those children sitting 5 feet from you are going to do. And
They're
so
very
often,
honest, aren't they?
so often they were irrepressible. They would talk to the performers. The very first play we did, called Betsy and the Spider, in it the characters are reduced in size to half an inch. And at the end of the play, they are restored to their natural height. And we wrote a line, I don't think I want to go back. I like being little like this. And a little kindergarten kid right there, 4 feet from the actress who just said the line, she said, that's okay. Your mommy will have something nice for you when you get home.
Oh, kids are wonderful. Kids are wonderful.
And many of those children had never, ever seen a live play before.
What do you think the importance is for young children to be exposed to theater?
I think it's invaluable, because if only to learn theater discipline. They learn if they want to laugh, they can laugh. We went to one school and the kids were so silent we couldn't understand it. And the principal had told every teacher to tell all the kids, now don't make any noise during the show.
Oh.
Well, so after that, and this happened early in the career of the play package company, I would give a warm-up speech to the entire school, kindergarten through 6th grade, with papas and mamas and teachers all around the periphery. And I would say, I would like to hear you laugh. Let me hear what it sounds like when you laugh. Oh, that's pretty good. Now, if something happens in the play that's funny, I want to hear you do it just like that. Let me hear you cry. Yeah, oh, and they would weep and wail and carry on. And I would say, no, that's pretty good. I don't think you're going to have to do that with this play. But I'm glad to hear that you know how. And that softened them up so they could react to some really funny situations that we wrote into the plays, and good comic dialogue and characters and so on. But we learned our lesson after that first time. And we could tell when we got into an elementary school what the principal was like. Within 5 minutes in a school, we knew exactly what the principal was like. By the way the kids acted in the halls, by the way we went into one school and the principal stood at the door where we were, and he greeted every single kid by name as they came into the gymnasium where we were performing. And just before he introduced me, he said, "Good afternoon, children." And they all said, "Good afternoon, Mr. Schaefer." The entire school. Well, now, it's great to play to an audience who will feel that free.
Yes.
And they know what to do.
It seems healthy. It seems like a healthy situation.
Yeah.
Now, we've talked about children, but I know also that you and Lucy wrote some plays that were more adult content and reflected what was going on.
We wrote one play about spouse abuse, and a very serious play. We didn't know much about it. I never abused her, and she never abused me. So we had to do a lot of research, but we wrote a play that was very moving in the theater, and it was gripping. It was the only adult play we've written, that we wrote, but it came off very well, and I was very proud of it.
It was a reaction. I know from my own experience that the theater and film and stories that are told through these vehicles, they can be healing and enlightening, and you need to know, and I'm sure you do, but you've been a part of touching, healing, moving, inspiring many, many people. That must be gratifying for you.
Well, the Greeks had a word for it, catharsis. In other words, you go into the theater and you have a very moving, earth-shaking, deep emotional experience. And because you have that experience of vicariously entering into the tragic hero's life and his death, You come out of it having experienced it vicariously, and you in your own life are cleansed through that process of imagination and involvement into the illusion of the play. And you come out a better person as a result. Well, that's partly what happened with this adult play. And in all of our children's plays, we didn't hammer the moral home, but every one of them had a lesson to be learned painlessly.
There'll probably be some future playwrights or aspiring playwrights, actors, writers, filmmakers who will watch this conversation that we're having. Would you have some advice for today's aspiring creative arts students?
Take every opportunity that you have to play. And it doesn't matter if you never get your name in lights, because playing is its own reward, period.
Now, when we were talking the other day, you also reminded me that your family has a website called Stephenson Tales.
StephenSonTales.com.
It has many stories, many wonderful stories. StephenSonTales.com, all one word, Stephenson Tales. And it tells you much more than you want to know about us. But I have some fascinating and some very funny tales on that website. And if anybody wants to communicate with me about them, they can communicate with Is there a link on the website? So
no, it's not identified, but I don't mind anybody calling me on the phone or even emailing me.
Okay, well, I have your contact information and we'll make that available.
Well, the email is lucybobs at charter.net. lucybobs for my wife Lucy and me, lucybobs at charter.net.
Wonderful. Now, we've talked about a lot of things, and we're also grateful that you shared this time with us, with the members of the Senior Center Network, and putting on this seminar. It was a great deal of work. You need to know how much we appreciate that. I hope you'll do it again, but I know it's been a lot of work.
I have been so exhausted after each of these sessions. I always wanted to do 4 things. I wanted to be a teacher, I wanted to be a preacher, I wanted to be an actor, and I wanted to be the head of a family. And I've accomplished all 3 of those. Oh, 4 of those.
All 4 of those.
Let me tell you a funny thing. Actors cannot do math. Did you know that?
I never knew that.
An actor cannot do math. I have known thousands of actors, and I have never known one who can do mathematics, including me.
I think there's other people that can do the math because there's very few people who can do what you do, Jim Bob.
Thank you very much.
One last thing.
Yeah.
We talked about life, and you talked about where your greatest happiness comes from, and I thought it was beautiful. I can remind you what you said.
Well, I used to say I find happiness through my productions in the theater, teaching the classes, and in my personal relationships. I don't know what I said to you before.
You said that, and you added that your greatest happiness was in helping others to find their potential.
Yes.
Nurturing their talents.
That's right.
Forgiving their shortcomings, and loving them in the hope of improvement in what they want to improve. That's
pretty good.
That was very good. Thank you for sharing with me and with our group here.
Oh, for Sharon, I'm Karen. Okay.
Thank you, Jim Bob, and thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you.